Alzheimer's disease was described for the first time in 1907 by the German psychiatrist Alois Alzheimer. In performing a histopathological study of the brain of his patient August D, suffering from dementia, he brought life to the presence of two types of lesions within the brain: senile plaque and neurofibril tangle. He reached the conclusion that of a distinct disease of the cerebral cortex. 100 years later, thanks to current scientific techniques, research has made a great leap in understanding of the disease.
We have actually been doing a lecture today talking about a general, idea of, prevalence of dementia and how it affects people. But dementia in itself has a range of definitions. So people will look at dementia as an umbrella body, talking about symptoms that affect the brain. So it's like a neurodegenerative disease and not a psychiatric disease. So people will see dementia as maybe someone is mad, or maybe someone has, when you get depression and mental health problems. This is real, where the neurons in your brain are dying. They are dying because of, proteins that are deposited inside or outside cells, and because those proteins then affect how the neurons work, because the neurons are responsible for transferring messages, from the brain to all over the body. So in a nutshell, I can say that's what dementia is, really an umbrella term used to describe conditions that affect, the functioning of the brain.
We know that the brain is made up of neurons, and these are interconnected to form a vast network. These connections, known as synapses, enable the transmission of information from one neuron to another.
Proteins, that are deposited inside the neurons in your brain will make the neurons to die. And when those die, then you stop functioning like that. What we actually addressed earlier on in the lecture was the different types of dementia. Because not only one, we've got a range of those. So we looked at Alzheimer's, and we looked at Lewy body dementia, we looked at vascular dementia, we looked at alcohol-related dementias, HIV-related dementia, and a range. So sometimes, if you look then, say, for example, at Alzheimer's, it is known that Alzheimer's is caused by proteins called amyloids. So these amyloids get deposited and then affect functioning. Then you get to something called Lewy body. Someone found proteins called taus, which also, affect, the functioning of neurons in a similar way, where the neurons stop functioning through the death of those neurons.
We usually take things for granted in our families. We live with the people with these conditions, particularly the elderly, and also at times some young persons who suffer those diseases, and we don't know how to handle them. So this lecture here has actually enlightened us. It has given us information how we can handle our relatives. But very unfortunately, in Zimbabwe, for example, most of the cases that come to hospitals are from those people who have tried to reach the formal sector. We've got so many people who believe in our communities, they have other treatments in their social circles, and we may never know the extent to which this country has been affected by this disease here we call dementia.
On the surface of the neuron is a large protein called APP. Normally, APP is sectioned by the enzyme on the surface of the neuron, and it frees a protein called amyloid beta. The amyloid beta protein is then cleared in the body. In the case of Alzheimer's disease, there's an imbalance. Amyloid beta protein is no longer regulated and is found in great quantity. The proteins assemble to form indissoluble fibers which form senile plaque.
Someone with Lewy body will be hallucinating, visual hallucinations. I could look at you now and think and see you as a different thing. You could be an animal. You could be a snake. So vivid dreams, for example, that's another thing with Lewy body, dreaming at night and constantly, not settling at all. But you can have forgetfulness, forgetting things that have happened. You can have also, confusion with it. But generally, that cognitive impairment where you fail to actually function the way you should. So different types of dementia will have different symptoms.
Dementia is not a specific disease. It's an overall term that describes a wide range of symptoms associated with a decline in memory or other thinking skills severe enough to reduce a person's ability to perform everyday activities. Alzheimer's disease accounts for 60 to 80% of cases. Vascular dementia, which occurs after a stroke, is the second most common dementia type. But there are many other conditions that can cause symptoms of dementia, including some that are reversible, such as thyroid problems and vitamin deficiencies. Dementia is often incorrectly referred to as senility or senile dementia, which reflects the formerly widespread but incorrect belief that serious mental decline is a normal part of aging.
We looked at age, what age are you before we can even think that. We looked at lifestyle, and we looked at gender. So with age, we look at, say, someone with Alzheimer's disease, which is a type of dementia. That would happen in people with 65 and above, usually. So it wouldn't happen, to someone who is younger than that. This is Alzheimer's, it is known. Then we've got a dementia called frontal temporal dementia. That can happen to anyone between ages 45 to 65. So it'll be, when we talk of age, you can pin it to specific ages with different ones, but mainly when you hit that age of 65, we start to worry then to say, this is a possibility, but it's not always that someone over 65 will develop dementia. So this idea of, people aging, therefore they should have, forgetfulness. They might have what's called mild cognitive impairment, which is simple forgetting. You will forget, but you will eventually remember where you put those keys.
Many people have memory loss issues. This does not mean they have Alzheimer's or any other dementia. There are many different causes of memory problems. If you or a loved one is experiencing troubling symptoms, visit a doctor to learn the reason. Some causes of dementia-like symptoms can be reversed. While symptoms of dementia can vary greatly, at least 2 of the following core mental functions must be significantly impaired to be considered dementia: memory, communication and language, ability to focus and pay attention, reasoning and judgment, visual perception. People with dementia may have problems with short-term memory, keeping track of a purse or wallet, paying bills, planning and preparing meals, remembering appointments, or traveling out of the neighborhood.
Yes, dementia does exist. I have witnessed it at a first-hand level, of which a family approached us seeking assistance with their mother who was diagnosed with dementia, and she had actually wandered away from home because of forgetfulness and that lack of coordination with time and space. So she was someone who left from Greencroft going to a neighbor's home, but then ended up in Dombosha and didn't know how she got to Dombosha. So yes, dementia is there, and in Zimbabwe, the prevalence, I cannot have the statistics as yet, but the prevalence is very high. But only that people are not coming forth for treatment and diagnosis. And the diagnosis which is there so far is the African diagnosis that when someone is aged, they should just be sent to the rurals and go and get sick there, of which is not fair. Everyone has the right for treatment.
44 million people worldwide, will be living with dementia at some point or even currently. And it's from the UK, 750,000 of those in the UK are known to have dementia. They've been diagnosed, but there could be more. By 2051, it's projected that that figure will rise to 1,700,000 people. Now, drill down to Africa, the figures are extrapolated from what we already know, from what's happening before. But I know of 2 studies that have happened in Nigeria, and I know of 2 studies that have happened, a study that's happened in DRC. They've combined those to try and say, well, what's Africa like? But that's currently, what we know now, roughly, about Sub-Saharan Africa. But work needs to be doing. The same document that talks about, this research that's happened, it still talks about, the need for more research.
One thing I like is that the dissemination of information to people who are in the health profession and also to just the general public will also assist in picking up the signs and symptoms. Signs and symptoms are very important when you're also when it comes to differentiating the different types of dementia. So I think this is the thing that is basically being used currently in not only in Zimbabwe but generally most African countries, where you basically need to pick up the signs of symptoms like there's memory loss, forgetfulness, and then you do all the cognitive function test until you make a conclusion.
Many dementias are progressive, meaning symptoms start out slowly and gradually get worse. If you or a loved one is experiencing memory difficulties or other changes in thinking skills, don't ignore them. See a doctor soon to determine the cause. Professional evaluation may detect a treatable condition. And even if symptoms suggest dementia, early diagnosis allows a person to get the maximum benefit from available treatments and provides an opportunity to volunteer for clinical trials or studies. It also provides time to plan for the future.
There are a lot of things that we can do to actually indicate that. We need perhaps, get scans going, because you can actually find out that the brain has shrunk through putting someone through a scan. You see a healthy brain, an unhealthy brain, that scan will show you that. There are techniques called like staining. You introduce a dye and it just highlights parts of the brain that have shrunk and that have not, that have been damaged. You can see how, say, in vascular dementia, for example, the mini strokes that you continue to have, and when you get, so these here, just grow into that brain and spread and start killing those neurons as well. That can be shown, through doing this.
There's one test to determine if someone is dementia. Doctors diagnose Alzheimer's and other types of dementia based on a careful medical history, a physical examination, laboratory tests, and the characteristic changes in thinking, day-to-day function, and behavior associated with each type. Doctors can determine that a person is dementia with a high level of certainty. But it's harder to determine the exact type of dementia because the symptoms and brain changes of different dementias can overlap. In some cases, a doctor may diagnose dementia and not specify a type. If this occurs, it may be necessary to see a specialist such as a neurologist or a geopsychologist.
Symptoms of Alzheimer's can cross over with Lewy body, can cross over with frontal temporal, so a mixture. So we've got work to do as far as I know. There's plenty of work to do just to, for a start, get people trained in knowing the truth. As you say there, the truth is, is our disease, black or white. And again, it's not being bewitched. It's not to say, I took an exercise with the crowd this morning also saying, dementia is for old people. It can happen at any time for anybody. When you see someone beginning to forget, it's not necessarily that they have dementia. They could be forgetting because there are other conditions like depression, stress, and a number of other things that can be responsible for just being forgetful. Memory and this mild cognitive impairment as well, you get to forget. If an old lady begins to have an infection, for example, they've got pain somewhere like my mum did, that pain becomes their big thing. Constipation becomes their big thing. As they concentrate on that more, they become confused and aggressive sometimes. And these are some of the symptoms that we see with people with dementia. We've got to separate those and say, well, we know it's not depression. We know it's not to do with constipation. Now we can, conclusively say it's dementia. We've done tests. We've actually put someone through a scan. And I think, we can do so much. And I often say, from where I am, there's a lot of work that's getting put into the dementia movement. You get societies getting formed, Alzheimer Society, Dementia Alliance and things, and people are there wanting to join this energy. Why can't we? Why has Africa got to be 30 years behind what's going on elsewhere? And also my argument also is, when we go there, some of us go there to come back home. You know what I mean? I hope it makes sense, isn't it? Go there to come back home. And if I've heard what I'm hearing, why should I sit there on it and not bring it back home? That's the argument. And I think there's a lot that can happen, through just raising this big awareness, doing more things like this public events, doing perhaps conferences a year and inviting, speakers to come in and share this, training people, I'm thinking of opening a training center at my mum's house and get some carers who really know what they're doing to look after people with dementia. Because medication is not going to cut it. We're not going to cure it.
Treatment of dementia depends on its cause, and the case of most progressive dementias, including Alzheimer's disease, there is no cure and no treatment that slows or stops its progression. But there are drug treatments that may temporarily improve symptoms. The same medications used to treat Alzheimer's are among the drugs sometimes prescribed to help with symptoms of other types of dementias. Non-drug therapies can also alleviate some symptoms of dementia.
It's not curable. Once you've got that label, once you've got it, you've got it. All we have to do now is look after you. And that's where we have, say, in places like UK and America and Europe, who have things called the person-centered care. So they would say, for example, what did Claudius like when he was younger? Or what do you like now? When you get to that stage when you have dementia, say you do, we can be able to deal with you because, your short-term memory goes and you stay with long-term memory. So you remember things that you're doing when you're 16 or when you're 3 years old, whatever it is. This here and now, you'll forget this interview that you're doing with me. Short-term memory is gone, is destroyed. So you remember the things from long back. But that's where it's important. I should enter that zone and help you out and live with you in that moment. I should live with you in that moment because there's no reason why I should be telling you that, say, for example, you remember a friend from long back and you say, oh, I've just seen him. I can't fight you with that. This is what we get told. A person-centered approach would mean I walk with it. So where's your friend? When my mum got to a stage where she was asking me whether I'd cooked for people in the village, what I would say is, listen, I actually, I've done so. They've got their food, Mum. Oh, okay then. So that finishes there and she's not distressed. So you work with people in that sense, and you can collect this information while people are still alive now, so you are able to deal with them in later life.
Some risk factors for dementia, such as age and genetics, cannot be changed. But researchers continue to explore the impact of other risk factors on brain health and prevention of dementia. Some of the most active areas of research in risk reduction and prevention include cardiovascular factors, physical fitness, and diet. Cardiovascular risk factors. Your brain is nourished by one of your body's richest networks of blood vessels. Anything that damages blood vessels anywhere in your body can damage blood vessels in your brain, depriving brain cells of vital food and oxygen. Blood vessel changes in the brain are linked to vascular dementia. They often are present along with changes caused by other types of dementia, including Alzheimer's disease and dementia with Lewy bodies. These changes may interact to cause faster decline or make impairments more severe.
Avoid stressful living. Make sure you exercise, make sure you don't get that diabetes, make sure you don't get that high blood pressure. Yeah, eat well, diet's absolutely banging, good, interesting, and then smoking and things, because they affect your circulation in different ways. If circulation and neurotransmissions and nerve cells are connected, you can see how this could be a problem. So live well, exercise, and then make sure you don't get the related problems that are associated with it. But sometimes the neurons will die for some reasons, so it's not something that you can effectively say I am going to avoid it by say like cancer, which is straightforward. This is sometimes cells will just die, those neurodegenerative cells will die and they go. So but there's things that can be done to prevent you getting to that stage. And what I know of the West now, the West are quite good at now doing a blood test. This blood test should be able to show you if you've got some indicators of whether you can develop dementia at a later life. So when they do those blood tests, then they can tell you, listen, for you to avoid that, do A, B, C, D things. In my situation, I'll tell you, because my dad was diabetic, and I went to my GP who said, well, this chance that perhaps you could develop diabetes at a later stage. Now let's put you into a program of 6 months, learning how to cook well, learning how to avoid things like alcohol, avoid too much oil, exercise. I have to wear that Fitbit, that iWatch that counts 10,000 steps. I should do minimum of those per day. And then you see your blood pressure go down, you reduce your weight, at least you're there. Because, things like diabetes and high blood pressure are known to cause inflammation that perhaps, is not good for your brain, which then ends up, resulting in having perhaps developing dementia.
Ultimately, the path to effective new treatments for dementia is through increased research, funding, and increased participation in clinical studies. Right now, volunteers are urgently needed to participate in more than 180 plus actively enrolling clinical studies and trials about Alzheimer's and related dementias.
I've worked with some people that are already, working with people with dementia. There's an organization called ZADA, which is based in Chisipiti. They work with the population of white people there, just looking at people who they have accepted that they have dementia. There's an organization called Generation, it's a church since Generation, I can't remember now, can't remember the name exactly, but she's doing beautiful work in Chinjike. This is in Mrewa. This lady called Mojo Isaineti is working hard to just raise that awareness. But as far as figures that you're looking for, to say I can say here it is how prevalent, we haven't got those figures.